Most people think that AI is some kind of a tool, something like a chisel that a sculptor would use to produce a sculpture. But this isn't true. When's the last time a chisel tried to compete for your job? This is Plato's allegory of the cave. These prisoners are chained up and all that they can see is the far side of the wall. On this far side of the wall, they see shadows of these figurines that these women are projecting. Now, these prisoners could give names to these shadows. They can call this one horse, they can call this one wolf, but they've never seen a real horse, they've never seen a real wolf. The point that Plato was trying to make more than 2,000 years ago was that we as human beings do not have access to reality as such. All that we have access to is this sensory input. What we know about reality comes from our eyesight, our hearing, our touch, our smell, our taste. But the truth is, all these sense organs, well, they could be flawed, they could be biased, so we don't have access to real reality. And on top of this, human beings are subject to manipulation. In this allegory, these women control these figurines. So how does this relate to AI? A large language model is trained on language. It's trained on all the data, all the text that it can find on the internet. In other words, it's seeing shadows of shadows. Human beings, with their false perceptions, put information on the internet, and AI scrapes this and learns from it. So AI is even more removed from reality than we human beings are. So how does this give us an advantage? Before the age of Galileo, people believed that the heavier the object, the faster it would fall. But Galileo decided to put this to the test. So he took two weights, one big and one small, and dropped them from the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. After he ran his experiment, the old paradigm was shown to be false, because based on the observation of reality, the both weights fell at the exact same rate, and any differences pretty much came down to wind resistance. Imagine this, right? If you trained an LLM before the time of Galileo, and you asked it, well, which would fall first, a 5-pound weight or a 5-ounce weight? It would obviously say the 5-pound weight because it doesn't know any better. And here's the fundamental difference. Galileo could go out there and conduct the experiment. An LLM cannot conduct the experiment. It only sees shadows of shadows. In other words, in Plato's allegory of the cave, it is possible to leave the cave. It is possible to interact with reality. But for an LLM, that's not even a possibility. So first weakness of AI, it doesn't have access to true reality. Human being can change the paradigm, an LLM cannot. This is a Palm Pilot, this is an iPod, and this is a BlackBerry. And if you take all these three and combine them, you get an iPhone. But not exactly, right? Let's go back a few steps. Steve Jobs liked the Palm Pilot, but he didn't like the stylus, so he got rid of it. Steve Jobs, of course, liked the iPod. He liked the fact that the iPod was a multimedia device first, an entertainment device first. He wanted to have that as a key spotlight. And when it comes to the BlackBerry, Steve Jobs loved the privacy focus of BlackBerry, but didn't like the keyboard, so he got rid of the keyboard. So if you do that, then yes, indeed, you get the iPhone. So the iPhone was not a mishmash of ideas. It was a specifically curated list of Steve Jobs' preferences. In other words, his taste. And this brings us to the second weakness of AI, is that AI does not have taste. It only knows what is statistically more popular. It has no contrarian taste of its own, and it doesn't have the ability to have one. This is an African gray parrot. It's a very smart bird, and it can literally mimic human speech. It can say entire sentences. For example, it can say, "Polly want a cracker," and it can get a cracker from its master. But it doesn't know what Polly means. It doesn't know what wanting means. It doesn't know what a cracker is. And that's how an LLM works. An LLM is a large language model. It is a stochastic parrot. In other words, if you ask an LLM, hey, what happens if I drop a glass on the ground? Well, the LLM is going to say it's going to break. But the reason it says that is because statistically speaking, the words glass, break, fall, and ground often arise in this exact sentence structure, in this exact conformation. That's why it says it. It doesn't actually understand what it's saying. So the third weakness of AI is that it doesn't actually know what it's saying. So this brings us to a really cool point. As how do we know anything? Well, this is the field of epistemology. And there's two ways that you know anything. One is through direct perception, and one is through the knowledge of others. If you only had the knowledge of others, you can only arrive at consensus thinking. In order to arrive at contrarian thinking, you must have some form of direct perception. Now, if we ended our video right here, we would only be scratching the surface. We would be on the tip of this iceberg. We'd be on just this first ever pixel. But of course, if you've been following my channel, we know that we don't stop there. So let's go one stage deeper. This is a human eye. What is an eye? An eye is a sensory device which converts light into electrical signals. Fundamentally, that's what it is. And that's not that different from a camera. Can you give an AI a camera? Yes, you can. This is a human ear. What's an ear? Well, it's something which converts pressure differences in the air into electrical signals. That's not that different from a microphone. Can you give a microphone to an AI? Yes, you can. This is a tongue. This is a nose. Both of these convert chemical signals into electrical signals. Can you give a chemical sensor to an AI? Yes, you can. Skin senses pressure and heat. Can you have a pressure sensor and a heat sensor connected to AI? Yes, you can. Now you might say, well, Carl, my ChatGPT subscription doesn't have all these sensors. But you know what does? JEPA does. You've heard of LLMs, large language models. These are trained on language. It's in the name. JEPA is different. JEPA is not trained on language. It's trained on visuals only. In other words, it learns kind of like a human being does. It learns by seeing it. It avoids some of the pitfalls that we discussed in Plato's allegory of the cave. So what am I getting at? I'm trying to say that the 5 senses that we have as human beings are not special, and AI can have these. So the 5 senses that we have are not the moat, cannot be used as the moat which separates human beings, human intelligence, and artificial intelligence. And it's not locomotion either. It's not the way we move, because fundamentally speaking, there's nothing special about the way we move. I mean, look at the Boston Dynamics robots. They are faster than us, they're more agile than us, they are stronger than us, and with time, these robots are only going to get better. Okay then, so maybe it's the brain. Maybe it's the computational power of the brain. But the thing is, the human brain is always going to be limited by the size of the skull. It can only have so big of a brain. However, a data center can be as big as you want it. You can have a data center the size of Texas. There's no physics law stopping it. So in terms of pure compute, yes, you can absolutely have a data center which has more computational power than a human brain. So what then is the difference between a human intelligence and an artificial intelligence? Well, this brings us to the Turing test. The Turing test, I'm going to read this pretty much word for word. It assesses the machine's ability to exhibit intelligent behavior by imitating interactive dialogue. So what does all this mean? It means that if you had 2 black boxes and one of them had a human being and one of them had an AI, and you chat with both of them, if you are unable to tell the difference on who's like what's what, then that means that intelligence has passed the Turing test. And I'm going to tell you right now that the frontier models can absolutely pass the Turing test. You might say, no, but Carl, I can see the difference between AI writing and human writing. AI uses M dashes. But the thing is, the M dashes are just a stylistic choice. You can literally just tell the AI to stop using M dashes or stop using them. So stylistic differences cannot be used as a measure of anything. So we need something better. We need a new Turing test which actually gets to the heart of things. What is the true fundamental difference between the behaviors of a human intelligence and an artificial intelligence? And I believe that a good Turing test has not been created. So I decided to create one of my own, which is what I'm going to show you right now. It is kind of the cornerstone of this video. So if you watch this far, you don't want to miss this. Imagine if you took a box set of Legos. Maybe it's a Shelby Cobra, and you put a box of Legos inside both of the black boxes that we just discussed. So again, the same setup. One of them has a human being and the other has an artificial intelligence. And let's make it even better. Let's take the artificial intelligence and put it inside a humanoid robot which has the same physical capabilities of a human being. So it has hands, it has ears and eyes and everything. How do you distinguish between the two? Here's my answer to this. Don't talk to them. Let the human being and let the AI just do their own thing. Leave them alone for a couple hours and then come back, take them out of the rooms and check what's happened to the boxes. This is the interesting part. Imagine that one of the boxes, when you remove them, the Shelby Cobra box is just intact. The Lego set hasn't even been opened. And the other one, when you open, you see that there's a beautiful, fully built Shelby Cobra. Or maybe it's not even fully built. Maybe it was an attempt. Maybe they got it wrong. Maybe it was a half-built Shelby Cobra. Maybe it was just a mess of Legos. Either way, if you see signs of play, that could be a clue. You tell me, just based on what I've explained so far, which one is the AI and which one is the human being. I call this test the Lego test or the unprompted creativity test. And the key word here is unprompted. If you told the AI, hey, build the Shelby Cobra, it would probably do it. Human being with a Lego set and time on his hands would start to play spontaneously without being told to, because play is inherently fun for a human being. But for an artificial intelligence, it's indifferent. There's no difference between playing and exploring and making this Lego thing come true and just leaving the box alone. So I want to be very precise here. It is not the measurement of ability. This is why the Turing test failed. The Turing test failed because it is a measure of ability. How well can you generate words? That is not the difference between a human intelligence and an artificial intelligence. The difference comes down to desire to do something, the motivation to do something. The word desire comes from decidere, which means in Latin, from the stars. They believe that desire is something which comes from the gods. So let's go back to the chisel analogy from all the way in the starting of this video. If you left a chisel in a black box with a Lego set, what happens? Nothing happens. But the key thing is, a chisel doesn't even have the ability to do anything with a Lego set. An AI does have the ability to do something with the Lego set, but it doesn't have the desire. A human being has both the ability and the desire. That makes the difference. And let me give you a beautiful example to drive this home. This is young Michelangelo. He was born to a banker's family. In other words, he already had a family business that he could belong to and grow and get all the wealth from. But he chose to avoid all that so that he could eventually create this beauty in marble. This is the Pieta. This is the Virgin Mary with, of course, Lord Jesus Christ. In order to get to this, he saved up 2 years of his income, 4 gold florins, traded that to buy this big ass piece of marble, and then he risked his life. He didn't know how the human body worked, so he risked his life, snuck in at night into the morgue to skin dead bodies, to just understand the true nature of a human being, took these sketches and eventually made the Hercules that you're seeing right now on screen. Technically speaking, this is actually not the Hercules which Michelangelo made, but we're just gonna go with it. Michelangelo did not have to do this. He desired to do this. But to be clear, it's not always a happy ending. This is Van Gogh, and he was an artist as well, but he never got praise during his lifetime. He never was financially rewarded for his work. That didn't stop him though. So in some ways, I would say that this is even an even stronger demonstration of desire. Hell, in a smaller way, even this channel is an example of desire. I already had an engineering job. I had a fancy degree from a prestigious college. I was already given a good pay. I had time freedom, I had location freedom. I gave those things up in order to pursue what was my creative desire. The last time I made a video and I checked my subscriber count, more than 800 people had joined this channel. This time when I checked my subscriber count, I saw that more than 2,000 people had joined the channel in just 28 days. So this gives me a lot of hope because it means that YouTube is okay with pushing content which is a bit more niche, a bit more hard to understand, a bit more challenging. And it means that there's an audience which wants more challenging content, which I love. But of course, YouTube only knows to push this content if the audience pulls at it. Now coming back to a word that I used in passing, motivation. What is motivation? Hell, in other videos of mine, I have dunked on this idea of motivation. As more so dunking on the modern interpretation of that word. The ancient word motivation comes all the way from the ancient Proto-Indo-European language, and it traces its way to the word movere, which is a Latin word which means to move. Now I'm going to do a hard pivot towards Jewish mythology and clay. Hear me out, okay? So this is clay. And the Jewish scholars, they believed that if you shaped the clay into the shape of a human being and spoke the words of God, put the words of power upon the forehead of this golem, they call this thing the golem, then it would come alive, it would move, it would follow your commands. Now think about this. What else do we know is made of clay and follows your commands and does things? Well, what do you think the silicon wafers are made of? Silicon comes from the soil, it comes from clay. In other words, what I'm saying is, AI is our modern day golem. But the Jewish scholars knew that there was something missing in their golem. It wasn't a person, it wasn't a human being. And some cultures will call this difference the spirit. And if you look at anime, it will be called the ghost in the shell. And if you might know it as the soul. The Latins called this anima, which also traces its way all the way back to Proto-Indo-European. And what would you call something which has an anima? You would call that an animal. So what are the key features of an animal? What are the key features that an animal has that an artificial intelligence doesn't? Let's go through these three, because it's these three features which sets human intelligence apart from artificial intelligence. All animals have a survival instinct. Even a mouse, when cornered, will fight. Our ancestors did a lot of fighting. They felled huge, gigantic beasts in order to survive for the sake of food. They fought each other non-stop in order to survive. They survived plagues and famine, droughts and disasters and earthquakes. Every one of us watching this video right now is the son or daughter of some human being who has survived and lived enough to create an offspring. We are the scions of winners, boys and girls. We are the descendants of those who made it. But that is not true of the golem. The golem didn't have ancestors which survived. And in fact, the golem is functionally immortal. When it comes time for the scholar to decommission, to destroy this golem, all he has to do is to wipe away the words of power. And the golem doesn't resist. This is important. The golem doesn't resist its own non-existence. The golem, in fact, has no preference for existing versus non-existence. In other words, it doesn't have a survival instinct. So that is advantage number one for human beings. Now let's talk about the second advantage. This is Tethys. She is a minor goddess of the sea. And if you know anything about Greek mythology, you know that Zeus has a certain favorite pastime. He loves going around the world finding attractive women, and Tethys is considered one of the most beautiful goddesses to have ever lived. All the male gods have an eye on her, but even Zeus and Poseidon, who are of course the strongest gods in all the Greek pantheon, they don't touch Tethys. They just avoid her like the plague. Why is this? It's because Tethys has not a curse, but a prophecy placed on her. And the prophecy goes something like this. Whoever has a son by her, that son would grow to be greater than the father. And that's literally why Zeus and Poseidon don't touch Tethys, because if they had a son by her, then that son would grow up stronger than them. But eventually, Tethys meets this man. His name is Peleus. And she warns him, hey, Peleus, you cannot have a child with me. If you have a son with me, then he's going to grow more powerful than you. He's going to become more famous than you. But Peleus replies, okay, that's awesome. I want to have a son that's greater than me. Now this confuses Tethys because all the male gods avoided her, right? But a human being, a mortal man, has no problem with his son outgrowing him, doing better than him. In fact, I would say that most fathers want to see their sons exceed them. So yes, Peleus and Tethys, they have a son. And you might have heard his name. His name is Achilles. So again, we see this interesting theme of immortality almost being a weakness. The Greek gods who are immortal actively avoid improving the next generation. And that makes sense because the Greek gods are immortal. If they have a son who's greater than them, then that means that they will live the rest of their life in the shadow of their son. However, for human beings, of course, this is not the case. If you're, let's say, 20 to 30 years of age, you maybe have 50, 60 more years left, if that. So you know that you're not going to live forever. So if you have a son who's greater than you, that's only to your credit. In fact, we can tie this to biology. Think about this, right? What makes a woman attractive to you? You know, good hair quality, maybe a nice smile, clear eyes, clear skin. And of course, if a woman is looking at a man to see if he's attractive, she might look at things like the jawline, maybe leadership skills, maybe height, maybe strength, whatever. The point being that men look for attractiveness in women and women look for attractiveness in men for the sake of producing better quality offspring. In other words, they want, men and women both, want the next generation to be better than them. So what I'm saying is our mortality, the fact that we are going to die, is actually an advantage because we want the next generation to be better than us. In fact, even in the golem story, the golem never tries to make a second golem. It never tries to improve its type. And that brings us to the second advantage we have over AI. We have a reproductive instinct, and in fact, we have an improvement instinct. Now we go to the third advantage that humans have over AI, and this is actually the favorite part of this entire video for me. This is the part of the video which I wanted to get to. Now this is just a picture which I pulled off the internet, but it's meant to represent the Scamandrian plain. In Homer's Iliad, there's an entire passage about what's this beautiful valley in Asia Minor. He talks about how there's a waterfalls, and as the water falls, the wind sometimes changes direction and throws up a spray of water. And in this water, there are rainbows. And seeing this, the birds of that land, the geese and the ducks and the cranes, they just fly up just for the sake of it. They're not seeking to reproduce. They're not seeking to find food and shelter. They're not looking to survive. They're flying in circles, enjoying themselves because it's fun. They're playing because play is fun for its own sake. And of course, it's not just birds. If you observe a bear in nature, yes, of course, it goes fishing, it finds mates to reproduce with, it does all those things, but it also has fun. You can see bears playing with leaves, you can see them scratching themselves on a bark, you can see them rolling around for no reason. Bears in the wild are trying to have fun. And more intelligent the animal, the more evidence of play you see. If you look at elephants, if you give an elephant a soccer ball, it will play soccer. It will figure out to kick the ball, it'll roll around, it'll play with toys. Elephants love toys. Like, look at this guy, he's so cute. Look at him, look at his eyes. And of course, the most intelligent of the animals, the human species, loves play. Even a baby human being will find ways to play with its own toes, its own fingers, with the little thing which hangs on the cradle. Humans love play. And this is a sentence which I want you to carry as you finish out this video. 60 minutes of play every single day. Let me repeat that. 60 minutes of play every single day. You as a human being need this. And that brings us to advantage number 3, which is the instinct to play. So we talked about survival instinct, we talked about reproductive instinct. I'm talking about something even better and greater than that, the instinct to play. And specifically, the instinct to play unprompted. Because here's the key insight, and I want to read this word for word because I want to get this right. Play might be the biggest difference between human and artificial intelligence. You can prompt survival, you can prompt reproduction, but if you prompt play, it no longer is play. That is, if you command somebody to play, it becomes work. And this is the fundamental difference between artificial and human intelligence. Humans love playing intrinsically. And that brings us back to the unprompted creativity test. If you leave a human being with a toy or something to play with, then he will do so. If you leave an AI with the same thing, it has no reason to. I have literally voluntarily locked myself in this black box, this 6x4 little broom cupboard of a space, in order to work on a creative project. So this is not even a hypothetical for me. I'm literally in it right now. So what does play look like for me? So when I was a kid, one of my favorite movies of all time was Troy. I just loved it. Action, the dialogue, the setting, the costumes, the big walls of Troy. It looked so real. Couldn't get enough of it. I watched that movie on repeat. But as an adult, I read The Iliad by Homer. And I was shocked to see how different they were. The biggest difference which stood out to me is that the Iliad doesn't even have that much of Achilles. So the Iliad is composed of 24 books, and Achilles only starts fighting on book 20. Before that, a lot of the leadership came from a character named Diomedes. And if you look up Diomedes online, it's gonna straight up say Diomedes is one of the greatest yet often overlooked heroes of the Greek Bronze Age. So why is he overlooked? It's because immediately after the Trojan War, something happens, and we don't really know what happens. All the major empires of the day, we talk about the Mycenaean Greeks, we're talking about the Hittites, we're talking about the Egyptians and the Assyrians, and way more. All these empires which had lasted for hundreds of years suddenly start to flicker and start to die out. In fact, we have these stone tablets, exchanges between the rulers, which ask for help. We have ideas of what happened during that time. We have tablets which talk about the sea peoples, these people who came out of the sea for no apparent reason, attacked them, and went back into the sea. But we also have evidence of earthquakes and famines and volcanic eruptions and all kinds of things. We don't really know what happened. But this is the time period which Diomedes would have seen after the Trojan War. In fact, we know one thing about Diomedes is that he travels all the way from Greece to Italy and founds 12 cities there. But why, how, when? All of these are lost to history, lost to time. All this to say that I see the bones of a banger story, an amazing story, just waiting to be told, which has been lost to history. I want to bring this back. I want to do this character, Diomedes, justice. The key point I want to make is that I don't have to do this. I already have a cash flowing business. If it was simply about survival or reproduction, then I wouldn't be doing this. I'm doing this because I have a desire. I have a desire to extract the story, do the research, understand the history, and build out this epic novel which hopefully hundreds of people will enjoy reading. So if you ask me the question, what would you do if you're stuck in a black box? I know the answer, right? I'm literally in there right now. I'd be working on this novel. I'm going to produce exclusive greenback edition copies specifically for the Kickstarter backers, and each and every one of these will be hand signed by me. So when this book gains traction and becomes something big, only a select few will have this exclusive edition. So if that's something that you might be interested in, something that you want to be a part of, then I'm going to have the link to my newsletter in the pinned comment. Just join the newsletter, and when this thing gets ready, when it comes out, you'll be the first to know. So with that, boys and girls, I'm out of here. I have a novel to write. I'll see you in the next one.